I'm not an engineer in that way, but I know what I want to hear, but sometimes I'm a little bit scared of messing things up on the way in. So I try not to do anything that would mess it up. But now I have engaged the compressor as well on the bass with a very high ratio. So it's actually like a limiter.
Okay.
Just a little bit, just a tiny bit to get.
So you got into doing that after some time. You tried it out and it worked.
I think it built my confidence when, that's a whole different story, but I use these as kind of a pre-mixing. If I track things, I very often record them again through the TUBE-TECH outboard. I don't have space for an entire band, so we do it kind of in portions. So I might find this great drum sound in the bass and have a guitar on top. All of a sudden it's all packed. So I need something to, well, let's take it to this space. And then I re-record it and EQ it or compress it, almost like you would do with mixing.
So you make an insert in Logic and then
send it to
run it through the rack.
To the rack.
This is the RM2 rack.
And record it back in.
And then you listen to it while doing that,
right,
and find whatever EQ that makes it work better.
And that way I built the track. So I already add a specific role to that instrument. And then when I end up with a session, I have all the original tracks, and right underneath I have, let's say it's a snare. I call it snare TT. That's the snare TUBE-TECH.
Okay.
So that's been TUBE-TECH'd.
Yeah.
You know? So whoever's mixing it, he can still choose the original track, or he can go to that to see what was my idea. Just like you would do if you have a plate, or if you have a great tape echo. Usually you don't have 5 tape echoes or 5 plates, so you would have to print the plate. That's actually what I do. I print the processed track. I used to do it with plugins, and what I realized is, now that I had all of this great outboard, I tried to do it with that. And I realized, once I did that, I committed a lot more to my decision. Because if you just take out a plugin or another, and that's how I tend to do it with plugins. If I have, an outboard machine, and I can actually hear if wow, that's a new sound. Or that's a new sound again. Like with the TUBE-TECH, you can go really hard on those EQs.
But if you compare that with the plugin, how does that, do you get the same action?
No. Well, there were a lot of good plugins, but basically to me, when I take out a plugin, I tend to find where it's actually working and not doing any damage. Instead of going forward. When I do it with analog outboard, especially the TUBE-TECH EQ and compressor, I tend to have like all of a sudden 10 options that I would like, that I have to choose from. So then instead of damage control, I get into a creative process with these machines.
When you make these decisions and you re-record, how often do you have to redo it? Sometimes,
but not nearly as often as I would take out that plugin again and bypass it, or does it do any good? Or, I mean, to me, the process about not looking to a screen, but listening and twisting a knob and hearing what does that do is so much more committing than the plugin. So I tend to go much more distinct in my direction when I have the outboard. And I would love to have like a console or 10 EQs, TUBE-TECH EQs, but I don't. So I have to do one track at a time. And it sounds like it's very slow, but then it's not, because I commit to those choices. So I constantly move forward because the process is so hands-on and so real.
As a musician and a home studio producer and engineer, then you tend to work on one thing at a time.
One thing at a time.
But if you know what you want,
I know, and that's my advantage when I go into the role as an engineer, is as a musician and as a composer and I really know what I want to hear. So the process of focusing on that one track is great. I might go back and redo it, I might not, but I find that when I focus that hard on it and I get that guitar to sit there to the left, then I take the guitar to the right and I color that in context with the other. If I had the plug-in going instead in that process, I would have not been as accurate on the first track. I said, I can always redo it, so let's do it here. And I'll go to the right guitar and it doesn't work, new plug. That process to me is very unfocused and not very creative and musical. So even though it seems like a very slow process, one track at a time, and you have one RM2 rack with an EQ and a compressor, I find that it can take me a long way.
This is the program EQ and the CM1A compressor you're using. Since you don't have a long engineering background, do you find it hard to?
Extremely easy. But maybe it's because I'm a guitar player and I've twisted a guitar amp my whole life. When I turn a treble knob and I hear it once, I know, oh, that's the area. I know exactly what that's doing. You know, if I pull out a plug-in, it just doesn't sound right to me. Even the good ones, not as right as they do. And the thing is about, especially, I mean, I've tried outboard that I couldn't figure out either. But the TUBE-TECHs are really easy for someone like me. No matter what you do, it actually sounds good. So it's a matter of taste. You don't have to tweak a bunch of stuff just to get it working. No matter what you do, it just sounds great. So it's a matter of style and taste. The compressor is super easy. I mean, I started when I just got it, and I was a little bit scared about the attack release stuff. I just used the fixed one. Now I don't use the fixed mode anymore. Because I think the attack and release is so great. I mean, even on snare drums, I tend to use the attack and release knobs even more than the threshold and ratio, because once I get them in, that's the amount I want to compress. I can control the tail completely with the two others, which is very interesting to me. It might be on page 1 in the engineer book, but to me that was kind of what you can do, how you can mess with the sound on the attack and release. The two knobs I was scared about.
You can actually hear when you turn them.
Oh yes.
What's going on?
Very much, yeah.
That's what I'm on about.